Well, a stunning new investigation from Dropsite News reveals that Jeffrey Epstein advised the Obama administration about cryptocurrency while the White House was negotiating the nuclear deal with Iran. Here is the story. I encourage you to read it. According to the report, Treasury officials consulted Epstein about Bitcoin, sanctions evasions, terrorism financing, and the future of digital currency as the administration tried to tighten pressure on Tehran during the nuclear talks. Now, think about how extraordinary this is. This is during the Obama years. Jeffrey Epstein has already been convicted as a sex offender, and he's welcomed with open arms by White House counsel, the Treasury, other globalist elites, political elites. How does this happen? This wasn't a man exiled from power after his conviction. He was still moving comfortably inside the highest levels of government and finance in the Obama White House. The investigation also reveals that Epstein met with senior Obama officials connected to the Iran negotiations, again, while simultaneously heavily invested in blockchain technology, cultivating relationships throughout the emerging cryptocurrency world. Joining us now is one of the authors of this report, Murtaza Hussain. Thank you so much for joining us. It's shocking. I mean, you can't really say like, oh, Obama, he's not in the Epstein files. No, a lot of his administration was. Can you explain this?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And thanks for highlighting the story. So, yeah, it's very interesting because people often talk about Epstein's political role and his associations. Very interestingly, his associations, for most of his life at least, were very predominantly on the more centrist liberal side of the political equation. And that was internationally to a degree. It was the Democratic Party in the US, the Labour Party in Israel, and the Labour Party at that time in the UK. So that was his sort of nexus. It went far beyond that, but that's kind of where he predominated. So this story talks a lot about his communications and ties with the U.S. Treasury Department during the Obama administration. And to your point, this was many years after his first conviction for crimes against minors, sex crimes. He was being brought to the Treasury Department, solicited by the Treasury Department for meetings and briefings to help them understand the role and implications of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in particular. At the time, his emails suggest and the meetings suggest that they looked to him as somebody who had more knowledge about the subject than they did in-house, which is really a profound implication because he was a private citizen and this is a major government agency. This was relatively in the infancy of cryptocurrency. And one thing about Epstein, and this also comes across in his emails quite a bit, and no one's really covered it, is that he had a lot of personal connections and interest and involvement in developing some of the core infrastructure of the then nascent world of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. He was very close with many people who were, the core developers of Bitcoin in the years after its creation as well, too. So, he was somebody who was at the frontier of many technologies, and there's reasons that he took that interest. But it was such that the U.S. government was soliciting him. And it wasn't just the Treasury Department. He was meeting with senior CIA officials who were involved in the nuclear talks with Iran at that time. And he was basically, his sex crimes and his convictions were not really seen by anybody, as far as we can tell, as an impediment. He was just viewed as a very powerful, influential figure whom the government itself was relying on for various things.
I once interviewed Joe Biden for an assignment, and I had to have a full background check just to get in that room to sit with the vice president. It was a job that was sponsored by Microsoft at the time. And they couldn't do a background check on the makeup artist, so she couldn't get inside the door, right? And so I had to do it myself. How does someone like me, who just sat with Joe Biden for 20 minutes, have to go through that and they can't see that Epstein has a sex conviction and he gets all of these doors? I don't understand. They had to have known.
Or they saw it and
it's
they
not
didn't care.
Possible that they didn't catch this.
Well, it's interesting because, an ordinary person like me or you or people watching this, they would have to go through more stringent background checks or scrutiny before they're solicited or by the U.S. government for this kind of work or even met with in these channels. It seems that Epstein's influence and power and networks were such that he could supersede these normal checks and balances. And people viewed the benefit of association with him as overriding any concerns they may or may not have had with his personal behaviors, which really were quite well known even beyond his conviction. So in this situation, it's very interesting because a lot of our reporting is based, in this story, is based on publicly available documents, which are released as part of the Epstein's estate, but also as part of the government disclosures regarding the Epstein files. But there hasn't really been much coverage of this. There's been tremendous coverage, rightly so, of his sex crimes and his associations with powerful people in some cases, but not about his political and intelligence activities, his contacts with senior intelligence officials in the US and Israel and other countries, and also something we've been covering quite a bit, his contacts with people who are at the cutting edge of frontier development of certain technologies, including biotechnology, human modification, cryptocurrency, and artificial intelligence. He was somebody who was plugged into those networks, funding many of these scientists as well, too. And this is the part of the Epstein story, which I think is very, very important. The nexus between elite philanthropic networks, government, science, and the finance world. That was something that Epstein bridged in his person. And again, if you weren't reading Dropside or watching Redacted, you may not hear about any of this in the establishment media. And that's really the interesting part of it.
Well, it continues, right? So Peter Thiel, Jason Calacanis, some of the names you talk about in this piece, and their connections between Epstein and these individuals has been strong. And of course, since his death, they've continued. So can you talk about some of this infrastructure that with Epstein's death has continued, particularly Peter Thiel, but also like Jason Calacanis?
This is a really important point because, Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, and that's quite a while ago now. We're coming up on 7 years since his death. And clearly from his emails, you can see that he was an important node in this transnational network of very wealthy individuals spanning different industries and different roles in government and the private sector. He was this connective tissue who, public officials, senior public officials around the world would rely on him for arranging their back channel talks with other governments or with people in the private sector like Peter Thiel and Jason Calacanis and individuals like this, oligarchs and so forth. He was the person that they needed, who had more influence and power than they did, and they needed him to do that. But, he's died a long time ago, relatively, and that network we're talking about, spanning all these people, there's never really been any accountability for it. In the US, no one's really been charged or gone to jail for anything in the Epstein files regarding the sex abuses or the other, evident corruption and backroom dealing that's taking place in these emails. So I think it's a very interesting question, and who is playing Epstein's role today? How has the network evolved or adapted? What is it doing today? And I think that this is a broader story that we haven't really gotten the language to diagnose it yet, although we're starting to make strides towards that, is that in the present day, it seems like power has migrated from government agencies or public institutions that we have some insight over into these shadowy networks of private capital and private individuals who are more powerful than states, and of whom Jeffrey Epstein was a member during his lifetime. And they're still there, and they're still operating. And we're getting upset with the government or upset with institutions we can see for not being powerless or unable to effectuate change. Meanwhile, these oligarchs who Epstein was embedded with. They're making moves, and they have the ability to act far more efficiently. So that's why I'm encouraged by the emergence and popularization of the term the Epstein class, because that kind of stabs at what we're talking about here.
Well, it's no secret Americans love sushi, my daughters included. And over the last 2 decades, raw fish consumption has exploded. Sushi bars everywhere, grocery stores selling it, gas stations sell it. Millions of people now eat raw fish weekly, but here's a hidden risk most people never think about. Parasites. Yeah, salmon, one of the most popular fish worldwide, but it naturally contains more than 70 parasites. Most of them are tiny, nearly impossible to see them. I'm sure you've seen the videos where people have gone to like Costco and they come home and they let their salmon sit out on the counter for a few hours and suddenly the little white parasites start popping out of the fish. Ugh. But once inside the body, parasites can hide for years while frequently laying eggs before any symptoms appear at all in the body. That's why many physicians are raising awareness about parasite exposure. Our friend of the show, Dr. Peter McCullough, recommends doing a parasite cleanse at least once a year as a preventative measure. The wellness company offers a hard-to-access RX parasite cleanse, USA compound with ivermectin and menbenzidol. Now, ivermectin paralyzes the parasite's nervous system, and then menbenzidol starves them. Each capsule contains 25 milligrams of ivermectin, 250 milligrams of menbenzidol, lab tested for quality. You can now get a more budget-friendly 45 capsule option that costs $250 less, giving you two 21-day parasite cleanse cycles. It's the same formula as the original, just a smaller quantity. So head right now to twc.health/redacted and use that code redacted to save $35 off plus free shipping. I got yelled at yesterday online by some tool bag because I said, Massey's loss last night is a win for the Epstein class. And a person yelled at me and said that this is just a dog whistle. What you're saying is it's just a Jew whistle. You should know better than to say that's the cover. It's a dog whistle for anti-Semitism to call them the Epstein class. What do you say to that?
Oh, well, the term was first popularized by John Ossoff, who himself is of Jewish background. So it's really not the people sometimes use accusations of racism or their various types to suppress legitimate political discussion. In this case, we're talking about a oligarchy class who spans people of many different backgrounds, many different countries, but who are united in sort of this project of accumulation of private capital at the expense of the public. And I would say very, very strongly degrading democratic accountability institutions in the United States and elsewhere, such that they can continue these activities with impunity. And again, it's kind of amazing that in the U.S. there's not been any legal accountability for what's been revealed in the Epstein files, for instance. It seems that people who were part of this oligarchy have realized that they can kind of do what they want without scrutiny, and that's what we're talking about, the Epstein class. This people whose names show up in here, people who may be 1 degree of separation away from the people who are in here, who are profoundly powerful and profoundly wealthy, and they continue accumulating wealth over this time. So it's not about an ethnicity or religion or anything like that. It's about, basically fairness and democracy and fighting against oligarchy for the benefits of the American people and many people around the world who are suffering from this. So Epstein is such a good symbol because he was such a morally objectionable individual, but he was not alone. And that people like that are still existing. And it's not surprising me you engage in sex abuses, because if you have so much impunity, you tend to go off the rails entirely. And that's what you see in his emails, not just his own behavior, but those of his associates around the world.
Right. And so I'm trying to figure out as I read this, what is Epstein's interest in cryptocurrency? It seems like because he was so involved in the Iran-Contra deal, he's interested in a currency exchange that's untraceable so that he could continue his nefarious deeds. And when I'm saying Epstein, obviously his interest represents the Epstein class. So there are people who still have an interest in it in this way. But he was very much like, ooh, you got to be careful, though, because... And what do you think then the Epstein class would still think about cryptocurrency for their what bad uses?
Yeah, so, as you point out, Jeffrey Epstein's emergence was really in the period of Iran-Contra. And we had a story about this some months ago at Dropsite, which, again, is not really, this aspect of Epstein's life has not really been covered, although it's all publicly available for the most part in documents. But Iran-Contra was an episode, obviously, of arms and drug smuggling, but also, as importantly, or more importantly, about the covert movement and storage of illicit funds. So at that time, it was very important to know people who are adept at money laundering, who can hide illicit funds and create black budgets and so forth. And that was what Epstein's sort of original you could say a core competency was. So throughout his life, he continued to play that role, among other roles, as somebody who was capable and fascinated with the ability to hide money and move money in different ways. So, at this point, in the late 2010s, the emergence of Bitcoin, many people, including myself at the time and others, we were very interested in the emergence of Bitcoin because, there was a global financial crisis, which it was created in response to ostensibly. And the impact of censorship and sanctions and all these things as a tool of political control, economic sanctions. So Bitcoin seemingly offered a way, and cryptocurrency in general offered a way to circumvent that or to get around that. But also, people took an interest in it who or maybe you could say were embedded in the previous system as well, but saw this technology as a new way of doing more of the same. And the same corruption that was taking place on Wall Street could be amplified if you have a good lead into this emerging technology. And Epstein, for what you can say about him, he was a very intelligent person in the sense that he had a very keen sense of where power came from. And he knew that one way to ascertain the direction of power in the future was to see the direction of technology. So that's why he surrounded himself with scientists of various types. And at that time, many cryptography researchers and data scientists, computer scientists were very interested in blockchain and what it represented and what it could do. And he wanted to be keen on that. He wanted to be, aware of it. He funded the emergence of some cryptocurrencies. Researchers he was funding and supporting, that's in our story as well too, had deep personal associations with people who were core developers of various cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. And his knowledge was such that, again, it exceeded that of the government at the time. And one thing our story notes is that by around this time, 2014, when he's briefing the Treasury Department, Bitcoin had existed for a few years, but it was only starting to be used as a tool of the geopolitical statecraft. And countries which are subjected to sanctions were starting to use Bitcoin to move money outside the U.S. sanctions regime. And also there was the emergence of the Silk Road, which was being used to buy and sell drugs and other things online using Bitcoin. So, Epstein was in the small category of people at the time who'd known about Bitcoin for many years, who'd been deeply invested and involved in it. And the Treasury Department was very behind the curve. So they really wanted to know from somebody who could explain this in great detail. And again, who did they call up? Jeffrey Epstein to give briefings and to debrief about this technology. And this is only one thing he had displayed at that time. It was quite remarkable, but he was somebody who was plugged in and ahead of the curve again of this technology and many others around that time.
All right. I mean, again, since our government won't give us answers, we can assume that a Jeffrey Epstein type person is still doing this, is still trying to pervert the global system to their will.
Yeah, and it's really funny because we theoretically have had all this transparency about Jeffrey Epstein, but as you notice, we haven't really at all. There have not been any public inquiries per se. The Epstein files they release are very partial and so forth, and released in a way which is deliberately, I would say, obfuscating what's really in them. The press has been mostly absent, and it's been really treated just as a limited hangout, in my opinion. It's just been tremendous coverage of a certain aspect of his life, and then ignoring the huge elephant in the room, which was his role as a political actor, as someone embedded in intelligence networks, oligarchic networks. And it's because the same establishment media outlets, which in theory are supposed to cover this kind of thing, and public institutions are supposed to deal with it, they are compromised by the same oligarchic networks, so they can't really cover it. So it's really fallen upon independent media, smaller outlets like Redacted or Dropsite News and so forth, to pay attention to it. And the information's out there. It's publicly out there and verified. It's merely the fact that they're trying to evade public reckoning with it. And I think if the public was more aware of what's in these files, if they were laid out to them in a way which did clarify what the implications were, which we're trying to do with our reporting, there would be tremendous public backlash and there'd be anger, even more so than there are today about the Epstein files, because it really does show a profound corruption, and of which Epstein was not merely an agent, but he's also a product of a broader system which is still operating.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this report. I want to encourage everybody to read it. Dropsite News, you guys are doing incredible reporting, so stick with them as well. Thanks for your time. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks. Good to see you guys again.
Great seeing you. Thank you so much for watching Redacted. We'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. It's totally free if you want to follow us or subscribe. And if we brought you any value at all, please consider sharing this video with a friend or a loved one on social media. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.